Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call this special committee of the whole meeting to session. I will read the, Trustee McCowie just offered to read the acknowledgement of land and water. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hatfield. We acknowledge that we are on land and surrounded by water, originally inhabited by Indigenous peoples who have traveled this area since time immemorial. This territory is within the lands honored by the Wampum Treaties, agreements between the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenni Lenape, and allied nations to peacefully share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. Specifically, we would like to acknowledge the presence of the Huron-Wendat peoples in the Three Fires Confederacy, Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture while remaining committed to moving forward respectfully with all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis.
Thank you very much. For attendance, we just seem to be missing Trustee Abhong, and she may be coming from work and maybe has been delayed, but I haven't heard that she's not attending. I'm looking for an approval of the agenda. Trustee McCowie, Trustee Cook, all those in support. That's carried. Thank you. Any declarations of conflict of interest for this meeting? Conflict of interest, seeing none. So tonight we have a staff report, purpose of our meeting from the 2026-27 budget. I would just like to start with a few comments, and I would draw trustees' attention to page 15 of the report, where it reminds us that the board has been directed to produce a balanced budget by the school year 2026-27, that we must have an accumulated surplus balance of at least 2% of the board's operating allocation, and our surplus at this board has sure been dwindling, and that we must file quarterly financial reports to the ministry, and that is because we are under condition, I will call it limited supervision, that required us to increase our financial reporting because of the deficits that we've had previously. So I just wanted to remind trustees of that. And with that, Superintendent Armstrong will quickly take us through the report. Oh, there he is. We're good. Okay. Thanks. Okay, all the trustees are present, and we're now ready for Superintendent Armstrong's presentation.
Thank you. I am pleased to present the draft 2026-27 budget to the Committee of the Whole. I would like to thank Mr. Mayhew for his exceptional efforts during very compressed timelines and changing ministry directives. Ms. Malash's efforts are also greatly appreciated for quickly organizing the budget package for distribution to you this evening. I would also like to thank the senior team for their collaboration during the budget development process. The senior team understands the importance of fiscal responsibility and invests their time to understand how the education funding formula works in order to make informed budget decisions to best support all students of the board. It's just like changing stuff here. There we go. Okay, the next item I'd like to discuss is the budget development process. This is a continuous cycle involving constant monitoring and review. Starting in February, the budget planning process begins with the development of enrollment forecasts and a budget risk analysis. In the spring, the Ministry of Education releases the core education funding announcement outlining the funding for school boards. For 2026-27, this announcement was delayed until May the 13th due to the introduction of Bill 101, Putting Student Achievement First Act. Concurrent with this period, the board seeks public consultation through a variety of means to obtain feedback from all stakeholders. The consultation process for 2026-27 includes this presentation, 2 public budget consultation meetings, and consultation with a variety of board and community committees, including the Indigenous Education Committee, Special Education Advisory Committee, Dismantling Anti-Black Racism Committee, the Greater Essex County Parent Involvement Committee, Student Senate, and a staff questionnaire that was sent out. In accordance with Bill 101, trustee feedback will be received and the budget is approved in June. The budget must be submitted to the Ministry of Education in their prescribed format by June the 30th. As a result of successive years of budget deficits, the Ministry of Education required the board to file a multi-year financial recovery plan in conjunction with its 2024-25 fiscal year. The ministry deemed the board's operating deficits to be structural in nature and required the board achieve a balanced budget by 2026-27. The ministry directives to the board are noted on this slide. As you'll note, I mentioned already, the 26-27 has to be a balanced budget. We must have an accumulated surplus balance of at least 2% of the board's operating allocation, which is $9.7 million. We are still required to file quarterly reporting and meet with the ministry every quarter on our financial results. Failure to make sustainable cost adjustments and reductions will result in increased ministry oversight up to and including supervision. The 2026-27 budget is based on 7 foundational premises which guide the decisions and recommendations in the draft operating budget's development. These include adherence to the Education Act, adherence to Bill 101, alignment with the board's mission, vision, and strategic priorities, adherence to all collective agreements and contractual responsibilities, compliance with the all Ministry of Education requirements, including the multi-year financial recovery plan, conservative enrollment projections, and thoughtful and responsible use of resources in an equitable manner to meet the needs of students. We'll now take a look at the education funding. School boards have flexibility within defined funding envelopes and accountability requirements in how they use funding to make local decisions that support the education outcomes of their students. School boards must work within an accountability framework. Education funding supports the day-to-day operations through the annual core education funding and construction and improvement of school buildings through capital funding programs. While there is still some flexibility to school boards, some funding is protected or enveloped to provide funding for key priorities, such as students with special education needs, student mental health and wellness, student safety and well-being, and Indigenous education. Education funding is represented by 2 pillars, as noted on this slide. Core education funding is made up of 6 funds and 29 allocations. Core education funding provides permanent, ongoing operating funding to school boards for the operation and maintenance of its schools. Capital funding, or building, expanding, and renewing schools, or BERS as we call them, consists of 6 funds. BERS provides funding for the construction, purchase, additions, and renovations of schools, along with the maintenance and improvement of the condition of schools and debt service costs. In 2026-27, the former funding pillar of responsive education programs was discontinued at the time of the budget's preparation. Some elements of the former REP funding is included in the 26-27 core education funding formula. So as you'll see on this slide, and as I just mentioned, the 25-26 responsive education programs that are noted on this slide are included in the 26-27 core education funding formula. That includes the early reading enhancement for reading screening tools, licenses and supports for reading programs and interventions, education staff to support reading interventions, the Math Achievement Action Plan, which includes the board math leads, digital math tools, and the school math facilitators, the special education needs transition navigators, and transportation and stability supports for children and youth in care. In addition, summer mental health funding has been announced separately for 2026. The 10 REP programs on this slide were not included in the core education funding formula for 2026-27. At the time of the preparation of the budget, no REP funding has been announced. In total, the board received $4.4 million in REP funding in 2025-26. Looking at the key changes in the 26-27 education funding formula, the first one is the investment for classroom supplies for elementary teachers. This funding requires school boards to make available $750, of which $400 is new funding, to eligible elementary teachers to enable them to purchase additional supplies for their classroom using a new vendor of record arrangement via Supply Ontario. Then there's the investment for consistent curriculum resources. This funding is intended to support a consistent set of high-quality, curriculum-aligned learning resources across subjects and grades. School boards must use the vendor of record arrangement with Supply Ontario to be eligible for the funding. Then there's the non-staffing benchmark. This benchmark has been increased by 2% to assist school boards in managing the increases in commodity prices, such as electricity, natural gas, insurance, and other costs. Redirecting funding from some prior years' responsive education programs to core education. And I've just discussed this on the last two slides. Dual credits. Funding to support the implementation of the dual credits program is moving from funding for external partners to a new dual credits component within the differentiated supports allocation. School boards are now required to manage the funding for the delivery costs of dual credit programs, including activities, administration, and coordination costs. Benefits trust increases. A 4% increase is being provided for the benefit trusts of employee groups represented by ETFO, ETFO education workers, CUPE, and OSSTF education workers. A 1% increase is being provided to support benefit trusts for staff not represented by a union. That would be the principal and the vice principal group. And then we have student transportation. Adjustments were made to the funding methodology to better align route level funding with costs, including rounding up the funded time of each bus to the nearest 15-minute increment and establishing a minimum daily funded time for bus routes. Because the budget is prepared in advance and is based on assumptions and estimates, there are risks that actual results may vary from the original budget. These budget risks will be discussed in the next 3 slides. Enrollment projections are completed in the spring based on known registration at the time of budget preparation. Late or delayed registrations are not captured in the projections. Changes in enrollment may result in increases or decreases in core education funding, including impacting the amount of the declining enrollment grant. The board is experiencing a period of declining enrollment, which is consistent with provincial trends. These trends are influenced by lower immigration levels, individuals moving out of Ontario, families having fewer children, families delaying to register their youngest learners in school as full-day kindergarten is not mandatory in Ontario, and families choosing to enroll their children in private schools or other publicly funded school boards. Special education also poses a risk to our budget. The number of students that require special education resources is increasing, and student needs are becoming more complex. The board's current special education model is not funded in the way it is currently established. And there are very minimal benchmark increases in 2026-27 in the funding formula. It is necessary for the board to reallocate unenveloped core education funding to support the changing and the greater needs of our students. Then these are the other additional budget risks that we have identified. Supply costs and absences. Core education funding is insufficient to cover the projected costs related to occasional staffing. Sick and short-term leave programs are centrally negotiated by the province. The board is diligent in managing attendance through its attendance management program, but funding does not address the full cost of absences. Statutory benefits. Increases in CPP and EI rates, pension rates, they are prescribed by the federal government, most of them, but they are not fully funded by the core education grants. And we have a funding deficit in this area. Inflation and commodity pricing. With the impact of U.S. tariffs, upward pressures on inflation, the potential of a technical recession, and the requirements under the Buy Ontario Procurement Directive, the board's purchasing power continues to decline. The 2% increase in the non-staff portions of the funding formula do not keep pace with the competitive procurements and price adjustments due to higher gas and transportation costs. Administration is prioritizing and monitoring the board's purchasing activities carefully to account for the implicit funding reduction. Aging infrastructure. Despite the recent new school construction, the board's overall infrastructure is aging. Approximately 54% of the board square footage is 50 years or older. Deferred maintenance totals $480.7 million, of which $54.9 million is identified as urgent and $150.9 million is considered high priority. Board administration buildings do not have any funding allocated to their repair or maintenance. And then lastly, we have claims, settlements, and other events. Potential claims, settlements, and grievances are not included in the draft budget due to their unpredictability and the inability to estimate a potential liability. However, risks exist for claims not subject to a limitation period and unanticipated events that may occur that impact the business interruption, cyber events, or acts of God, and which may have a financial impact on the board above what is currently provided for under insurance policies. Now we'll move to the 26-27 draft operating budget. Developing this budget was very complex. We are dealing with declining student enrollment. We are dealing with the requirements and the directives under the board's multi-year financial recovery plan. We must comply with the requirements under Bill 101, and we also have the expiration of collective agreements. And it's important to note that the operationalization of Bill 101 has many unannounced components. It is currently undeterminable whether additional administrative efforts will be required to comply with the various requirements of the bill. No additional funding has been provided by the ministry to support any additional administrative efforts. I'm pleased to tell you is that the 26-27 operating budget that's presented to you tonight is compliant with the Education Act, and it is compliant with the board's multi-year financial recovery plan. The budget has a projected surplus of $185,000, and the projected accumulated surplus balance expected on August 31st, 2027 is $26.8 million, which exceeds the 2% minimum that is required by the ministry. This slide provides a summary of the 26-27 draft operating budget. Operating revenues are projected to be $535.9 million and are $8.3 million lower than the prior year's budget. This is primarily due to declining enrollment and the elimination of several responsive education programs, which were not incorporated into the core education funding formula for 26-27. Operating expenses are projected to be $535.7 million and are $9.4 million lower than the prior year's budget, primarily due to a reduction in salaries and benefits resulting from staffing level adjustments, again due to declining enrollment. And it also should be noted that there are no salary increases or in the benefits or salary benchmarks, except for the principal and vice principal group. That was provided by the Ministry of Education. It's also important to note that this draft budget is relying on $5.1 million of the declining enrollment grant, which is temporary in nature and provides the board time to adjust its cost structures to newer enrollment levels. This slide provides a summary of the projected accumulated surplus. Per the multi-year financial recovery plan, the board is required to maintain an accumulated surplus balance of 2% of its operating allocation. This approximates $9.6 million, which is well within the range of the projected August 31st, 2027 surplus balance of $26.8 million. When examining funding allocations and operating expenses, there are several areas where the board realizes funding deficits because the funding allocation is insufficient to support the current expense structure of the board. There are 5 primary areas where funding deficits arise, as noted on the slide, totaling $32.8 million. These funding gaps must be managed through unenveloped core education funding. This requires that senior administration and the chief executive officer identify the key priorities of the board to inform budget decisions. The 26-27 draft operating budget reflects the board's commitment to the learning and well-being of every student. Areas of specific focus include justice, inclusion, equity, and diversity, Indigenous education, and special education. Senior administration is committed to ensuring that the budget resources are allocated to support students where our current practices are not working as well as they should. The board continues to invest in the dismantling of inequities experienced by Black students, staff, and their families. While there is no funding from the ministry for equity initiatives, the 26-27 draft operating budget supports 1 full-time equivalent teacher consultant, 1 full-time equivalent Black graduation coach, and 5 full-time equivalent Create Your Future advisors. There are also non-staffing supports of $230,000 that are also provided in the draft budget. In collaboration with the Indigenous Education Committee, envelope funding of $2.1 million will be used for the staffing supports highlighted on this slide, and also for non-salary expenditures such as professional development and supplies to support Indigenous education for 26-27. Special education continues to experience significant funding pressures. The draft 26-27 operating budget continues to support special education programs and services and equipment for students through the Learning Support Program, the My Achievement Pathway to Success, or the MAPS program, Giving Attention to Individual Needs and Strengths, the GAINS program, and Skills to Enhance Personal Success, the STEPS program. Similar with other funding, special education funding is largely derived by overall student enrollment. Due to the board's declining enrollment projection for 26-27, special education funding is projected to decrease, while cost pressures continue to exist. In the 26-27 operating budget, the deficit in special education is projected to be $11.9 million. Funding from non-enveloped areas within the core education grants will be allocated to address this funding gap. At the time of budget preparation, a projection of 5,627 students with an identification are expected for 26-27, which is lower by 231 students from the prior year. The 2026-27 staffing complement has been adjusted downward by 23.4 full-time equivalents due to the lower projected enrollment. Additional details on the special education section can be found in Section 6 in the 26-27 draft package. Most of the board's ministry funding is derived from student enrollment. Therefore, administration is conservative in projecting enrollment, utilizing known registrations at the time of budget development. Elementary enrollment is projected to decrease by 612 average daily enrollment students over the 25-26 budget. Secondary enrollment is projected to decrease by 588 average daily enrollment students for the same period. Due to a projected enrollment decrease combined of 1,200 average daily enrollment students, the board is eligible for the declining enrollment grant totaling $5.1 million. This is bridge funding to give the board time to further adjust its cost structures to lower enrollment levels. The enrollment decline is consistent with the trends being noted by the ministry and across many other school boards in the province for the reasons that I shared previously in the presentation. International student enrollment, which is not reflected in this graph, is expected to increase by 27 students and will generate funding of $1.6 million. This slide provides a summary of the 2026-27 projected revenues with a comparison to the prior year's budget. Core education funding is projected to decrease by $5.2 million in 2026-27. Details are outlined in the draft budget package. Generally speaking, factors influencing the revenue change include the declining enrollment, as we've already mentioned, which reduces so many other grants. But then we have new grants that were added within the core education, including the reallocation of some responsive education funds into core ed. And then we have the declining enrollment grant itself, which got generated. Amortization of capital contributions is projected to increase by $1.7 million to align with the acquisition and amortization of tangible capital assets in 2026-27. This includes the additions at Roseland Public School, Glenwood Public School, the renovated Forest Glade Public School, and other school renewal and school condition improvement projects that are planned for the year. This slide provides a high-level summary of operating expenses. Salaries and benefits are the largest expense of the board, representing 80% of total expenses. Instructional and administrative expenses are projected to decrease over the prior year budget, primarily due to a reduction in salaries and benefits resulting from declining enrollment. And the changes in the staffing complement are described in page 19 in the budget package. Transportation expenses are projected to decrease, primarily due to declining enrollment. The board's share of transportation expenses is proportionately related to the number of students who utilize that service compared to the other boards in the consortium. Pupil accommodation expenses are projected to increase over the prior year's budget due to cost pressures, which are anticipated to exceed the 2% non-staff benchmark increase provided by the ministry in the 2026-27 School Facilities Fund. Specifically, utilities expenses are expected to increase by $800,000 due to higher energy and hydro rates. Despite declining enrollment, building square footage remains unchanged. Then there's the transfer of the dual credits recovery program to school boards, which also impacts pupil accommodation expenses for the non-salary expenses the board must incur to manage the program. And then we have inflationary increases in contracted services, which are competitively procured and are projected to exceed the 2% non-funded staffing benchmark. Other expenses include rental expenses and interest charges, and they are expected to decrease due to cost-saving measures that we implemented as part of the multi-year financial recovery program. And the increase in amortization expense is consistent with the increase in the revenue side, which was the amortization of deferred capital contributions that I explained on the previous slide. This is a summary of the capital funding. That's a second budget now, right? We're talking here. That's available to the board for 26-27, including any carryover funding from prior years for use in the 2026-27 school year. A detailed list of projects is noted on pages 51 and 52 of the draft package. It should be noted that the board will be receiving $900,000 less in school condition improvement funding than in the prior year. The ministry has also instructed boards to prioritize the spending from school condition improvement and school renewal allocations to address facility condition, ventilation, accessibility, health and safety, and general code requirements. And I got my smoochy poochie there. And with that, I'm sure the CEO and the senior team would be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Superintendent Armstrong. Thank you for the presentation as well as putting together the budget package for the trustees. I'm going to go around the room to take questions. We'll go for a first round of questions, then a second round if people still have questions. And I would just like to say that if you are going to ask a question and then want a supplementary to that question, supplementary means that you need to clarify something from the answer of your first question. Supplementary doesn't mean a second question. So please keep that in mind because it has been used incorrectly a number of times, although I let it go. But I don't know where we're going to be at the number of questions for tonight, so I just wanted to be clear on that. Okay, so I'm going to start with Trustee Lovell, and we're going to go this way. So, Trustee Lovell, questions on the budget?
I have no questions at this time.
I should mention that some trustees may have already submitted questions and gotten their answers already, which is what we encourage. So that might be the case for some trustees. Trustee Buckler?
No questions.
Okay. Trustee Cook? Trustee McCowie? Student Trustee Foster? No. And we're going to go to Trustee Nelson? Student Trustee Rivington?
Wow, first question. Amazing. I was just a little bit confused on like the changes in the dual credit program. If you could respond and like those expand on those new like responsibilities for the board and changes in the program.
And who can answer that?
Through you, Madam Chair.
Yep.
So previously, the funding for dual credit, School College Work Initiative, was the ministry provided the funding to CODE, the Council of Directors of Education, and there was a separate company within CODE that managed all of it with the learning table partnerships of school boards and the colleges. That third party has been removed and the funding flows directly from the Ministry of Education to school boards now. And then we distribute the funding, for example, to St. Clair College for our dual credit programs. So that third party has been removed and we distribute the funding. Depending on how the learning partnership table is determined, it should be funded. So they have some administrative costs just like we do. So you're paying for the seats for students to be able to take credits at the college. We fund the teachers, they're Greater Essex teachers who teach in the program there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee McKinley?
Thank you. I did have a question. I did mention it to Superintendent Armstrong regarding the tracks. It looks like they're finally going to be removed, but that would not be this summer. That would be a year from now, I'm assuming. And I guess my concern is now what it was when we first heard about them. How do we ensure that we get grass in that area and not just the giant mud puddle? Because we didn't do the appropriate things to ensure that we grew the grass in those areas.
I'm not sure about the implication about us not doing something that was appropriate, but maybe we can get an answer to that question. Superintendent Armstrong?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. The removal of the tracks, because this is the 26-27 budget, the work related to that wouldn't even occur until next summer once the students are not at school. And we would work with, it would be part of an RFP or a tender process in terms of ensuring that not only is it properly seeded and the drainage is appropriate, because it's more than just ripping and putting the dirt down, but we would also ensure that there would be some element of maintenance as part of that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Burgess?
Oh, I have questions. And reading the report, I see things by omission, and I think I know the answer, but I'm wondering why they're not in the report. Because one of the big changes for next year, I'm assuming, because I couldn't see it as an expense, are membership fees for external organizations, because they have not been allowed by the province. That has, I think, severe implications for our role and advocacy and collective savings in things that our membership fees have gone towards. So I'm wondering why it's not mentioned in the report, because it is a significant change, I believe. And it does have large implications in political advocacy. Now, I can understand why the province doesn't want to encourage political advocacy, but I'm wondering why it's not in the report, because that's something that next year will really will impact what goes forward.
I don't think the onus of the finance department was to present things that aren't going to be funded. It's to present where our limited funding is going to be spent. And the ministry has directed that there won't be any money for outside third-party memberships. So I don't know what more administration could do for you on that. I don't know if you have anything extra to add to my answer.
Well, I do have a supplemental specifically to augment that question. So
Okay.
on page 27, and in the slide deck, it was shown specifically, and I appreciated this page because trying to not see the whole big picture and try to understand what's coming and going and what got transferred and moved and what got decreased, etc. That table shows the REP allocations in the prior year and identifies the REP that have moved to CEF and that have been discontinued. So that may not have anything to do with external membership fees, but just like any other, I'm going to say, extra thing that we have supported that wasn't necessarily flowing under a particular line before in our grants and whatever, it could have been captured on that page, for example. Things that have been discontinued. I think that membership fees, and my question is supplemental, but it wasn't only about OPSPA, it was about, what are the things about COSBO and OASBO and OESC, things that we have used that are in danger of disappearing, just like some of the positions that have disappeared that support students. They also, those organizations support students, no doubt. So I'm wondering if the report can be augmented before next week to at least acknowledge that.
So through you, Madam Chair, and Trustee Burgess, I absolutely appreciate your concern over what's been eliminated. Page 27 specifically is to responsive education priorities and only responsive education priorities. And the purpose of that page was to show trustees that we are receiving $4.3 million less in additional buckets of money that we used to see as little windfalls that would come to support these specific projects. association fees, although is upsetting that those are no longer covered, that is not part of that. So to put this in this chart, well, then I would say that that would be an insurmountable amount of work for the finance department, and they can correct me if I'm wrong, to go through line by line of every single thing that was funded and not funded. And I do appreciate the concern around the OPSPA fees. I absolutely appreciate that. However, there's minute details of many things that are no longer funded if you went into the nitty-gritty of each line of the budget. So I would hate to highlight one over the others that have also got lost along the way that we're no longer funded for. And a perfect example would be the $750 that we actually didn't receive $750 for, and that comes out of our instructional budget. That would be another line that we would have to focus on in a $550 million budget. So I hear your concerns, absolutely.
Well, a point for information, if I could, Madam Chair, because we're going to have another meeting next week. We're going to, look at the same things, and this is procedurally very different from what we've done in the past. We have a CEO who's going to be presenting this, and there's no arm's length, in the political advocacy. Normally, we would say, "Oh, send a letter." And with the submission of our budget, can we send a letter and please point out the fact that we feel that these things are also missed because we have supported them in the past, yet we can't recount the fact that there's an extra loss here. So I don't know how we do that. My point is, if it doesn't exist somewhere in a document and it's just captured in some, concern raised, it doesn't exist.
I think as the CEO just explained, there are many things that no longer exist. And so I take the point that will be a tremendous amount of work to try and identify every single item that no longer exists because of the changes in the funding. So I'm not sure what it is that you think the CEO needs to do or not do, but as I said in my memo, if there's something that you think needs to be changed in the budget presentation or in the budget funding lines, you would make a motion that the CEO consider something. So
I guess I haven't made myself clear. I'm not arguing that it's been removed. That is not my point. My question is, how do you capture it when we submit this? Because previously,
it's up to the CEO to decide what needs to be captured or not captured.
Through you,
she's
Madam
already
Chair,
explained
I will just say
there.
I have other questions. I'll wait for the next one.
Okay. Trustee Chin, your question? Maybe tell us the page number. That would help too.
Oh, I don't have the page number. It's regarding the cut of the second ESL, English as Second Language, and I didn't see that this.
What cut
it was
that you're talking about?
English as second English as ESL, English as Second Language program, and based on the information from the union, and most of the teachers in this program will be cut, and I think the students who needs this service is the most vulnerable, and I don't know why we do this.
So, Trustee Chin, the CEO did explain that to us.
Yeah, I understand.
The program has been
I
altered.
understand. Yeah.
No, you don't understand. If
yeah,
you,
can
if you
I
think
finish?
it's been cut,
Can
then
I
it
finish?
hasn't been. The service has been changed, not cut.
The service changed to the in schools, in each schools, but why the teachers' number are cut? And you can just remove and reorganize this kind of service. Because I know how important this service is for foreign students, not for the immigrants. Yeah.
Superintendent Roberts, can
Thank you.
clarify?
Sure. Through you, Madam Chair. So these decisions were certainly made with lots of careful consideration with the well-being and our students' academic success. And while there has been an overall decrease in student enrollment, I can assure you that there has been a significant decrease this year in the number of assessments that we've done for new Canadians to our region. That is a statistic we get weekly, and the numbers have significantly decreased. Research and ministry-aligned thinking also emphasizes that language acquisition is also most effective when it is embedded in an English language learning environment. And we already have a program that already exists with a French immersion program where those students are immersed in the French language environment. So we're mirroring a program that already exists. Furthermore, there are supports for students in schools that have a higher amount of student enrollment of students who identify as ESL or ELD. So contrary that there are cuts to the program, there are actually continues to be supports for those students.
Thank you. Do you have a supplemental question on ESL?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
To that answer?
Oh, yes. I understand that the explanation is that you change the format. But I'm wondering if you cut those teachers, most of the teachers, they are specialists in that. And also, ESL is different with French immersion. And most of the students who join the ESL are from other countries. And so I feel that they need, when they just come to this country without any English language.
So what are you suggesting?
I'm asking if the service is enough. And I also heard from the union that they want to come and bring this bring their concern to this meeting, but they were denied because of they missed the deadline of submitting the...
No, Trustee Chin, you're mixing things up. There are no delegations at this meeting. The delegations were for the Finance Committee meetings, which have already taken place. So you're mixing things up, but Superintendent Roberts gave you an answer to your question, that the supports are still there for the students, that ESL, a number of students has declined, and that the program is based on a model like immersion French. So I think your question has been answered, and it's up to the CEO to decide how the program is going to be run. So your question has been answered. So I'm going to move on now to Trustee Abong, and we'll have your question.
Yes, I have 5 questions actually. Yes, I will start with one, and thank you for taking them on the fly. So the first one is related to page number 30, summary of expenses by category, board administration. So looking at the administration costs, I understand that we are compliant with ministry limits. From governance perspective, how does our current administrative spending, which is about 11.3 million out of 12.9, which is almost 87.6%, how does that compare to peer boards of similar size? And given our financial pressures, are there any opportunities to optimize this and redirect the savings toward student-facing priorities?
That's a big question for on the fly. I can't speak how this board compares to other boards because other boards are still rolling out their budget. So I don't have a full basis on which to do a comparison. And perhaps Mr. Mayhew can give some context to what's included in the board administration expense line. I mean, it's not just superintendents. It's much greater than that. So I don't know, Mr. Mayhew, if you can do that quickly or not.
Maybe if I could just say first, that's why we encourage trustees to send their questions in advance, because administration can't always...
Preparation. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
I mean, if we have to
sometimes it's easier if administration could email you their answer if they don't have it off the top of their head, right?
I understand.
So I just want to say that might have to be the answer. in some of your questions, okay?
Through you, Madam Chair, I can speak to what's in that line. That line would include superintendents. That line would include all the functions to support the schools that are located primarily here at the admin building, such as accounting functions, purchasing functions, payroll functions, HR functions, IT functions, as well as all the associated costs of running those functions, such as just heating this and cooling this building, for example, maintaining this building. We also have a facilities building. Some of those expenses and some of those functions might roll into this line as well. Let me see. I think I mentioned human resources, payroll functions, but any really functions that support the schools that are not part of the instructional process. I can say that we have I've looked at other boards. We look at our percentage relative at times. I don't have the data in front of me. I can say that over the past few years, we have worked extensively to reduce any expenses in those lines that had any bit of contingency or play at all, or we had opportunity to reduce them. So we went through as a team line by line by line by line, and a lot of those expenses aren't necessarily discretionary in nature. It are items you have to pay, right? They're non-discretionary items. So we try to assess what's discretionary and reduce them as much as possible in order to get to that balanced position.
Yeah, so I understand you guys have done the due diligence so there are not many opportunities there to optimize further. Okay, yep, thank you. That's the answer I was looking for.
Thank you. I'll look back over here if anybody's picked up on any questions. No? Okay. Sorry, was there some? No? I don't know. Got it. Okay. This way. McKinley. Trustee Burgess, you said you had other questions?
Thank you. Let me get the page again. What was it? 27. I note that discontinued on page 27, and of course on the slide, we saw summer learning for students with special education needs and summer mental health supports were discontinued for next year. I'm assuming, and I don't know, normally we would, I say normally, nothing's normal, but I mean, generally we would kind of get an idea of what was happening this summer as far as summer programs. I don't know if it's already been cut. I thought we had summer programs in our budget last year. Did I miss that? And there's a value to have summer learning for students with special education needs and summer mental health supports, because we know that there's often summer learning losses and kids who need routine and to maintain what they've had throughout the year in order to make a successful September start really need those summer supports. So discontinuing them and not having them somewhere else, did I miss that they...
I'm going to let the CEO respond.
So through you, Madam Chair.
So the funding...
The funding is discontinued for those. However, we did get a recent summer mental health after the production of this document.
Okay.
Because we're getting everything last minute. And instead of reprinting everything, so that funding did come through, and we still do have our summer camps running this summer. However, the reps were discontinued.
And so I hadn't finished my question. The other thing was the graduation coaches program for Black students. Also, the funding discontinued. However, I saw that we made a commitment to those, or to one. I didn't know if that was who we had supported, and I wrote it down here somewhere, in the positions that we had, whether that was a decrease in the positions or that we just managed to fund it somehow, even though the reps were discontinued. So I'm just wondering how we moved it around. I couldn't put it together.
Through you, Madam Chair. So yes, the rep was discontinued based on the priorities of the board, and Superintendent Armstrong shared that in the presentation. As a focus of the board, we committed and took the money out of non-enveloped core education funding because it's a priority of ours to continue that work, even though the ministry no longer provided the rep for it.
I appreciate that. Thanks. Can I ask if that money showed up for these summer mental health support? Did it come anywhere close to what we had before, or is it going to be a diminished kind of support?
Through the chair to the trustee, it is very similar to what we had last year. It's actually only within a couple of $1,000s. They've also given us the opportunity to use those funds to an end date of October 30th, which will actually allow us to better support professional learning opportunities for a variety of our educators at both elementary and secondary schools in the fall.
Thank you. Trustee Chin, did you have another question?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. And my question is regarding the procedure of the consultation of the budget. And based on my information, not many representatives has the opportunity to give their comments. And even the union representatives, they missed the deadline for giving the comments. And I'm just wondering why we treat the format so strictly instead of taking the comments from public, from the unions.
Trustee Chin, this was on there was a discussion at the Finance Committee, Finance and Facility Services Committee. We had a full discussion of this. You were there. So we're not going to bring it up again. This would be your third time bringing it up. We're not going to keep repeating it. But the budget consultation process was reported fully in here, as well as the Finance Committee meeting. And Trustee Macau is the chair of that committee, and he's nodding his head. And in our bylaws, delegations are allowed at our standing committee meetings, and that was advertised. That was mentioned at public meetings as well, that delegations would be heard at the Finance Committee meetings, and some people did take that opportunity to present, to delegate to the board. So you've brought it up 3 times already. So I think we've exhausted that matter.
Can I clarify? It's not the third time. I just got the information from the union. Can I finish? I didn't bring this up before. I just got the information. Can I finish my words? By law, I should have at least 3 minutes to finish,
Trustee
right?
Chin, there is no law. There's no provincial law. There's no federal law that says that
that's
you're
fine.
allowed to speak for 3 minutes. So
Can I finish my words?
So
Yeah.
no, because I don't think they're appropriate.
Why?
Because
You don't know what I'm going to say. I'm just reading the concerns from the union representative regarding their denying to be a delegate. They missed the deadline, and they got the information after the deadline, so they don't have any chance to.
So they were given the opportunity to send their information to the trustees by email, which they did. So that's done.
My question is that why we strictly control the format and don't give chance other community chance to
Trustee Chin, I
express
already
their
mentioned to
concern.
you that other people took the opportunity to present, and if we didn't have bylaws that govern how our meetings take place, we would have chaos. So trustees have approved those bylaws. Trustees approved the standing committees would have the delegations. Everything was handled properly, and I think that we have. I know that we've talked about it 3 times because you brought it up at the Finance Committee, you brought it up at the following public meeting, and then this is your 3rd time bringing up the same thing. So we've exhausted that one, and I'm going to move on to Trustee Habhung, who has another question.
So my question, again, pertains to page number 30, expenses by category. Supply staffing remains a significant cost driver at approximately 14 million. What strategies are being considered to address this pressure? I mean, I noticed really constructive ideas in the appendix, actually. And are there any opportunities to advance those strategies to improve attendance stability and reduce the reliance on supplemental staff over time?
So through you, Madam Chair, I'll start and then turn it over to Superintendent Bryan or Mr. Mayhew or Superintendent Armstrong if they have anything to add. So we do work with SBCI, the School Board Collective. We do get absence reports from them. I'm happy to say that we're actually above provincial with our other board partners in SBCI. Although absence isn't great, we trend better than other boards do. We have some specific union groups that we're doing some pilot work with that we've seen some great results from. And I commend those groups for working with us on that. And then Superintendent Armstrong already referenced our attendance support program that we're required to have in place. So we continue to work. Unfortunately, you have to have a teacher in the classroom when a teacher's away. So there will always be a cost associated with that. Some of our positions don't have replacement costs, but some do. So when there's absences, there has to be covered. And we continue to try to work around that. And then I'll turn it over to Superintendent Bryan if there's anything else.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think you hit all of the areas. So I have nothing further.
Thank you. Okay. Still nothing over here. Trustee Burgess, you have another question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could, I'm trying to put together how we came up with acknowledging that we have decreased enrollment. We don't know, because I would say for the last at least decade, the patterns of enrollment for kindergarten registration, for example, have just been like, wait until September, then you'll know, maybe. And the adjustments, of course, on that, the enrollment date or whatever, have always taken place in a significant way. We've acknowledged that our special education funding is not going to meet the needs in an ideal way that we would like it to. It hasn't in a long time. It's always been stressed as far as a funding thing. And I note that on page 30, the ECEs, the amount for ECEs has dropped. Now, how do we know that the decrease in enrollment that we have is going to also be at kindergarten level and affect the assessment for those kids who are coming in that we don't know yet and what their special education needs are? And if it's following a trend like we've seen in the last while, where kids are arriving not really well prepared for kindergarten, have we acknowledged anywhere in the document or in any way that we're going to be sending this to the ministry that this is it's a risk? It's a bigger risk than just decreased enrollment and the funding that doesn't accompany it. It's increased special education needs, and we already are not staffing, as many ECEs, for example.
Through you, Madam Chair. So ECEs are staffed based on 16 in the kindergarten classroom. So now that the original staffing allocation has been done and numbers of students per classroom, that would determine the number of ECEs. Much to my chagrin about reorganization in elementary school and the chaos that creates and what that looks like, there's the opportunity there. So for example, if a classroom goes bigger than, right, we would allocate the ECEs at that time because we would have increased enrollment. We can't send information to the ministry on what ifs because we don't know what those what ifs would be. And we've come to board before for increase in support staff if it's needed based on the needs of the students. The ministry is very clear on being very conservative in your enrollment projections. You're correct. We do see a decline, right, of people registering, especially JKs, early. And oftentimes it's late, sometimes as late as the first day of school. And that's why we have reorg, is to readjust for that. In addition to that, you speak about special education, and I think that, the ministry will be required to look at the Auditor General's report that's come out around special education. So will that make a difference in terms of funding or allocation? I don't know. Maybe it's too soon, but maybe something will come from that as well, because year over year we do have a deficit in that area, because as a board we prioritize those programs.
And supplemental to that, I have seen, and I've seen it from external agencies as well as coterminous and other, saying that it's not just pandemic, post-pandemic, that there is an increased need. The kids that are coming, learning readiness, behavioral, language, whatever it is. And so I don't want to be making that up. I want to say, do we have those stats that, again, when we give our budget and we go to the ministry and we say this, now that we don't, yes, I approve it and let's put the letter there, can we bring that in an advocacy way to say that, at Greater Essex, like, our needs are great. It's not just, we've tried everything, but even it might be at reorg day, after reorg, but budgets are always about predicting in the best way you can. And, I see a little tempest ahead.
Yeah, and I think, Superintendent Mills and his department, they do an exceptional job of tracking who's coming in, to the student, right? What are their needs? He brings it to the senior team all the time, whether it's a request for transportation, it's a request for an additional student support worker, whatever it happens to be. They have very detailed student profiles. We don't know the names of the students, but he does, and what their needs are. So they track every single bit of what's coming in after we've done this initial budget and then again at reorg.
Chin, do you have another question?
Oh, yes. My question is regarding the track of Massey School. And as far as I know, once we destroy the track and put it on grass, and it would be very difficult to put back, to build another track, and it's more expensive. So I wonder if what endeavor you have done to try to keep the track. And
Trustee Chin, that's not a reasonable question. There is no track. We don't have funding for tracks, and we've talked about that many times in this boardroom, many times. So there's no funding for tracks. There's no track coming to any of our schools in any conceivable way at all. So
excuse me.
That's your answer. We don't have funding for tracks. There are no tracks.
We normally don't have funding for special items, and I don't think it is reasonable to say we have no funding for track, like we have no funding for washrooms like this. And what I mean is that track is very important, and the other board has built up beautiful tracks. So excuse me. Okay.
We've talked about this many times. There are no funds for tracks. If you want to make a motion that the CEO consider putting money into this budget for tracks, then you make that motion and see where it goes. Otherwise, we're not talking about it again. We've talked about it many times. So that's your option.
You want me to make motion later or now?
That's your option. Because there is no money. There's no money from the ministry to build tracks. So what is it you want the CEO
I think
to
there
do?
is a different way to build a track, not using the funding. We can, collect community donations and supports.
So Trustee Chin, there is no money from the ministry for tracks. So we're done with this discussion.
Sure. So can I
Through you,
ask?
Madam Chair? So tracks have come up several times. Trustee Chin, to your question about asking the community, I can't tell you how many times we have publicly said, if anybody would like to come forward and provide funding, and I've yet to see, I won't say a penny because there's no such thing as pennies anymore, a nickel come forward from anybody in the community to provide funding for tracks. Again, it's a public meeting. They're hearing about it. If anybody comes forward with funding to put tracks in schools, we will gladly accept it and to continue to maintain the tracks because we don't get that funding either. And your comment about washrooms, those are regulated and they're required to be to have bathrooms in schools. So we do have those and we do receive funding for that. That's very different than a track outside of a school.
Supplemental regarding the track. Yeah. What's the noise there? Is it normal to make noise when other trustee is speaking?
Chin, I think everyone's frustrated because we've talked about this many, many times.
I'm just
keep bringing it up.
Yeah.
What is it you want to accomplish from your question?
I wonder if we can reach out to the city because I heard the mayor said they are going to help with building the track and share the usage of that.
Okay, Trustee Chin.
That's
got nothing to do with this budget presentation. So
to you, Madam Chair.
We're done.
Linda, maybe if I can help rephrase a little bit constructively. So maybe have we looked into some of the other options, like collaborating
yes, we
with?
Have. We've been
I think
doing
that's
this for
what
a couple
she's
years.
looking for. I think that's the response she's looking for.
And Trustee Chin has been there through all of that.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Trustee Abhung, did you have another question?
Yes. So I'm still on page 30. So I love numbers. So as you can see, professional development and consultants and coordinator costs. So I noticed that professional development appears in several areas. It has its dedicated PD, but it also appears in consultants and it also appears somewhere in coordinators, also in admin. So is there a way to consolidate everything and prioritize professional development to focus on just high impact initiatives? And the question goes further towards like, how can we reduce some of the low impact PD or consultant expense?
So through you, Madam Chair, some of the professional development funding is enveloped funding. I'll use math as a specific example. We get X amount for math, it must be spent on math. I don't think we do any low impact professional development. Perhaps you consider that, I don't. I think all of our professional development is exceptional. Otherwise, we wouldn't be doing it. In terms of some collective agreements have funds in them for professional development embedded right within their collective agreement, so we must adhere to that as well. And then there's very little additional professional development. We're in the middle of planning next year's professional development. Most of it will be done on professional development days, so there's not additional cost to that. In terms of consultants, they are direct supports to the schools. The math consultant supports math. French supports French. Early years supports early years. So if that's an area where trustees would like us to cut more, I would say that's a very dangerous road to go down. Because although they're not directly in the classroom, they're supporting the teachers who are in the classroom. Especially knowing we have new curriculum coming in kindergarten, grade 7, grade 8, and grade 10, that there's a lot of work that's going to continue to be done there.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. I didn't know whether the consultants were directly student-focused, student-facing. So thanks for clarifying that. And so when I meant low impact, I meant prioritization. So obviously, all of the initiatives are really making an impact, obviously, but every time we would have some prioritization in there. So that's why. But thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone come up with a question here? No? So we'll go back here. Trustee Burgess.
Thank you for letting me ask this question. There's been a lot of questions about how we are shifting our focus and our classroom management and our staff assignment to support students who don't have English as their first or second or third or whatever language. I always loved having the ELL rather than ESL because many of our students who come to us, of course, have multiple languages, just not English yet or French. So to support them, good segue from the last question, I see that professional development costs, are affected. I hear that there are certain PD days. I wonder how prescriptive the ministry-led focuses on supporting students who have language barriers of either having not French or English as their first language. And I'm wondering if, because we're supporting in classroom rather than any kind of separate or withdrawal or standalone English language learning classes specifically, how we're going to support our professional development for our staff who've never done it before, or deploy the staff that we have that have done it and how we place them. Because it's obviously mixed in with the collective agreement, with staffing. With some schools have many more of kids that need language support because they don't have English as a first language. So I'm wondering what we're doing in that regard. I have concerns that it's our best intentions are going to be there, but what do we have to really support it so that it's as smooth as possible?
So I'll start through you, Madam Chair, and then I'll turn it over to Superintendent Roberts. You asked about ministry. There's zero priority from the ministry on PD days related to, they've given us priorities. However, they are not related to what you're speaking to. And I would say that we didn't make the decision easily. And we're educators. I would like to believe that we know what's best for students, and we model that every single day. We're never going to leave a child behind. Never. And we will ensure that we have things in place to meet their needs, just like we've done with reading, just like we've done with math, just like we've done with special education. And although you say that some teachers are experts in it, I truly believe that every teacher comes every day to do the best for students, and that they continue on their own professional learning as well, outside of what we provide, to do what's best for kids every day. That's why we become teachers. So, if you have anything to add.
I can certainly add to that, since some of the work that we've done in the last couple of years since the Right to Read report, and a focus on reading specifically, a strong focus on small group instruction regardless of the content that's being taught. In addition to that, 24-25 was a focus on universal design for learning specific to student needs. We've done a lot of work as well as culturally responsive pedagogy, and definitely in our secondary schools that has been a strong focus every year. In addition to that, the work we do on assessments and evaluation for reporting purposes. To add to that, specifically to the MLL assignments, we're currently in a staffing process. So I'm not sure who has been assigned to those to work with those students. Once we have that data and that information and can better focus on their needs to support our students, then we'll put a plan in place to support them in those schools. But as an overarching, we've done a lot of work to support all students, regardless of the profile they come into the classroom with.
I appreciate that. Just to be clear, I should maybe have said experience, not expert. I didn't mean that. I mean, obviously some of our staff take that professional development personally, and they learn and they have more experience. That's what I meant. We have a deep bench in that, and I just want to make sure that it gets disseminated in a bigger way.
Trustee Chin, do you have another question?
Oh, yes. On page 45, we have we have deficit for JIED or DEI, and it's almost 900,000. I want to know why we have to put money on this without funding, and we can cut anything else without funding, but here is out of our pocket, and we spend money on that. And at the meantime, we cut the teachers' positions, we cut the ESL teachers' positions, and I don't understand why we
we'll have
insist on
someone
this.
answer to help you understand.
So through you, Madam Chair, I think there's a difference when you say that we cut teacher positions. As of right now, because we're in the middle of staffing, no teacher has been cut. There's a reduction in certain areas. It doesn't mean they're going to be without a job. So I don't want the public to believe that teachers are losing their jobs. We're not there. We're still in the thick of staffing right now. So they may be reallocated to somewhere else. To your question around justice, inclusion, equity, and diversity, the senior team, and I believe a majority of all trustees, perhaps maybe but one, believe in the importance of it. And you spoke last meeting around special education and the funding. We get allotted $68 million in special education, and as a board, we choose to have a deficit of $11.9 million more. So an $899,000 in terms of justice, equity, inclusion, and diversity, I think is minuscule compared to our special education deficit of what we choose to spend there. It's about the priorities that we've determined. We had 2 delegates come to speak to us at budget consultation, specifically around the importance. We have a dismantling anti-Black racism strategy that we've committed to for 5 years, and in my opinion, long beyond the 5 years. So therefore, that's why we put the money in that area. And a reminder that we have come in at a surplus at the overall budget.
And I just wanted to add that I already sent trustees an explanation on that. Maybe you didn't see it, but that budgets, school board budgets, are required to demonstrate that they align with provincial priorities in education. And embedded in these priorities is the requirement that in addition to student achievement and safe and supportive learning environments, that all publicly funded education system must ensure fairness, equity, and inclusion. And to accomplish that, there are costs involved. And that's why you see this in our budget. And it's been in our budget every year for many, many, many years. So I'm going to move Trustee Ebong now.
Supplemental?
Supplemental.
Yeah, supplemental. Yeah. My question is that true equity or inclusive if we hire counselors instead of hiring the specialist teachers for the English as second language students, those who don't understand any English when they come? And do you think it's really equity for our school board for those kids?
Through you, Madam Chair. So I think I said earlier, we're not abandoning any children. We will still have an extremely robust support system for our English language learners, like we've had my entire career with the board. We are not abandoning any child. So we don't prioritize when it comes to equity. Equity is the work of the board for all students to feel safe and included, regardless of how they identify, whether it be English as a second language, whether it be Black, whether it be 2S LGBTQ, whatever it is, all identities. We don't abandon children. We meet the needs to the best that we can for every single one of them. We don't prioritize one group over another.
Trustee Ebong, your question?
Yeah, supplemental question. So on JID, I want to acknowledge the importance of this work and the impact that it has on the students and engagement and outcomes. So I fully support it. Supplemental question to that is, have we explored leveraging some of the external partnerships, for example, provincial and federal fundings or corporate social responsibilities like diversity fundings of RBC, TD, Scotiabank, where their focus is also similar and they could join hands with us to give us more funding.
So through you, Madam Chair, we can't use any of that funding for staff. You cannot pay employees from funding from outside providers. We're funded from the ministry for staff positions. There are some things that we do partner with. I can use a perfect example of St. Clair College. Just donated their facilities to us for our Black Joy, Black Excellence program, which would have been a cost to us. That's one example. I can use our GSA. The federations provide funding to help support and offset the costs of that conference for our students. Multicultural Council of Windsor, right? There's multiple things, but we cannot rely on funding from outside providers for staffing. And the purpose of that is, what if they can't pay it next year or the year after, right? So the board has to sustain that for the employment of individuals.
And so this specific dollar amount was specifically for the staff that's mentioned here.
Correct, and a small amount of professional learning.
Thank you. I'll just check. No? Okay. Back over here. Trustee Burgess, do you have another question?
Yes, and it's not quite rhetorical, but I'll leave it kind of open-ended, and it's for public consumption, I think. Something that I didn't see in here, this is the end of a contract year. We are no longer, as trustees, involved in anything, negotiations, etc. As of August 31st, not only does this budget year, fiscal year end, this budget starts, and we've predicted costs associated with the general 80% of our salary range, etc. What if it hits the fan? I want to know, the budget. We're predicating it on something.
You're asking about the collective agreement?
The collective agreement.
That's been mentioned in here, that there is no allowance for
for
whatever
any kind
it
of,
is, because the ministry is responsible for funding whatever comes out as a result of those collective agreements. That was reported in here.
That's true, and we've also had some things where additional grants, different things, supported certain programming that also supported staff, and we've been grateful for those things. My question is, I guess, the tenor of things this next year. Yeah, okay, it's a crystal ball that nobody's going to predict. Okay.
Trustee Chin, do you have a question on something else?
Oh, my question is that do we have a chance to make motion?
What's your motion? Your motion.
My motion is regarding
the CEO should consider. This is the CEO's budget.
Yeah.
So as I explained to you, your motion has to be that the CEO consider something, whatever it is you want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Due to the complaints regarding the ESL program exchange, I requested the CEO to make a consultation regarding this program change.
No, this is about the budget. You can't make motions about anything else. We're talking about the budget. You're
yes,
talking about a program.
Make a consultation before making the budget.
The budget is done. The budget is done. So your question is out of order. The budget is done. So nothing's going to be changing. So it's done.
Humbly, yeah, I want to ask how can we start a consultation for this program?
The administration of those services to our students are the business of administration, not the trustees. They've been explaining to you all night how that's going to happen, as it will with all our students for all their needs. So I think that they have answered that many times tonight. So unless you have something different, I'm going to move to Trustee Ebong.
I was going to say point for information.
Information?
You have stated to us in writing, so that we are prepared for this meeting, stating that if we wanted to enter a motion, it would be a recommendation to the Chief Executive Officer that they do a specific thing to change the budget. In other words, look at the line that you want to move and find it somewhere else and try to rearrange something for the budget, because you can't just start at this time when the superintendent of business has said this has to be submitted by the end of June. We have a meeting in 1 week. There is completely out of order to have a
decision on programs,
consultation.
not
Exactly.
ours.
So I just want to say
So,
for information,
right.
that's
Thank you.
it's moot.
Right. So we don't make decisions on programs. So that motion would be out of order. If you wanted to make a motion about a budget line item, that's different. If you wanted the CEO to consider taking out all the money for Indigenous education, that would be a motion. Don't think you'd get very far, but but that's the type of motion to be considered. But program decisions aren't part of what we do as trustees. So, Trustee Ebhong, your question.
So I am on page number 51, capital budget. And so considering current environmental conditions, increased high temperatures, I understand some schools don't have HVAC systems for, say, kindergarten classrooms, but now consider this as only an example, okay? So clarifying it. So some schools don't have HVAC in the kindergarten classrooms. However, we are spending a little bit money on track removal. So I wanted to understand the criteria of prioritization. Maybe you guys have already considered track removal for past 2 years, and that's why it has hit this year's budget. And so that's what I want to understand. And what was the criteria for prioritizing it this year versus deferment to next year?
If I could just mention that with the tracks, we have concerns for liability for the conditions of the crumbling asphalt or whatever it is, that we have to keep it safe, those areas safe. So that was the consideration there. And I can't tell you with regards to the HVAC question. So
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. A board report came forward 2 years ago, 2024, that examined the condition of certain tracks across the system. Those tracks, and we had a professional engineer and consultant take a look at those conditions and those tracks, and they were deemed to be unsafe from a liability perspective, unsafe for students to use. So all schools that were impacted by this assessment, they were told to close their tracks and students could no longer use them. And then there was some there was interest expressed by some groups about potentially replacing these tracks. In all that interim, as the director has indicated, no fundraising group, no group has come forward to fundraise for the replacement and the maintenance. That's an important element of these tracks. Meanwhile, they continue to sit there and pose health and safety risks to the board, which could have significant consequences from an insurance and a liability perspective, our premiums, all that sorts of things. So we need to spend the money to get rid of the liability and the hazard that currently exists at these schools, or else it's just producing a greater risk to the board overall that could far exceed, a lot of our other renovations. In terms of the the air conditioning, for example, and the HVAC in schools, we do have a policy and a regulation that explains when we would put in air conditioning and or conditioned air, which is different, which is the removal of humidity in our schools. And it's primarily done whenever we have a new school construction or if we have an addition put on. Unfortunately, some of our schools are very, very old, and the building envelope makes it very, very difficult and extremely cost prohibitive to go back and to try and run venting and to run air conditioning systems in there, because then you have the worries about mold, you could have dampness, you could have all kinds of issues that relate to that. We know that it's an interest to the community. We appreciate that. And certainly it is something that the facility services team considers. But we also have $480 million of deferred maintenance, and we need to prioritize some of those items. So
Two supplemental questions. First, related to the HVAC systems that you just mentioned, are there any other alternative temporary measures that can still make the classrooms a much more supportive learning environment where kids are not sitting in, 35 degrees cooking?
Wish I brought my air conditioning notes with me today. Well, we always put out weather alerts and tips to the teachers and to staff about measures that they can implement, things like shutting the blinds, turning off the lights, keeping students hydrated. Every school has a cooling area. There's always an air conditioned space in every single school, so that the principal and the staff can rotate, so that students can potentially go, if it's the library or a staff room, and rotate students so that they can get some relief from it from that perspective.
Understood. And so the other one was related to the closing of the track. So explain a little bit further to me. If we say this track is closed, would the students still use it? Okay. So then if we say it's closed and we can't use it without removing it, would it still be safe?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, these facilities, these tracks that are listed are unsafe for any person to utilize. That includes members of the public. We don't rent or make those available through community use of schools. We have instructed principals not to allow their students to use that in gym classes or for extracurricular. I hope that they're not using them. I trust that they're doing the right thing, but they are completely not safe. And if you check the board report, it was in the fall of 2024. I can't cite the exact board meeting. There are pictures. There's an assessment of the cost to repair these tracks under a variety of scenarios. And it's just cost prohibitive. And we don't get funding from the ministry to put tracks in our facilities. Our ministry funding is for students in the classroom and for curriculum-related items. I know a lot of people like to have these items, but I don't believe that having a track is a curriculum-related item.
Thank you. Still nothing on this. Anything here? Trustee Burgess, do you have another question?
Did we lose any librarians in our staffing for next year?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that it was clearly articulated about what positions changed, and librarian was not in there.
Sorry, I wonder, I remember during the meeting years ago regarding the track, I remember the first plan is to use asphalt, to use asphalt to repair it.
Trustee Chin, question about the budget. The budget that we have in front of us tonight.
Yeah, this is the budget regarding
What
the
page?
track.
What page? Tracks aren't in the budget.
The track is in this budget. It includes the track removal budget. Yeah. So
Okay.
in page 50,
Okay.
page 51.
So your question is about removing.
My question is that regarding, I remember the original plan that we wanted to do is to use the asphalt to repair it, and it was delayed by a trustee's motion. Yeah,
What's
is
your
that
question?
correct?
What's your question?
My question
about
is that the original plan for the track, what's the original plan of the track? I want to clear that information.
No, Trustee Chin, what's your question about the budget?
The budget about the tracks, I really think the track is important.
Okay,
Yeah.
Trustee Chin, we're going to move
And,
on. You've
I-
already brought that up 2 or 3 times tonight, as well as many times over the past couple of years. If you have a question about the budget,
My question is that the previous budget for
No.
repairing the track has
No.
been changed.
Trustee Chin, what's your question, please, about this budget? I think that's very simple. What is your question about this budget? And if you don't have a question, I'm going to move on to Trustee Ebhong. You have another question?
Yeah.
No, you're done. Okay.
Oh,
Thank you.
I have a question. Yeah.
What is your question? What is your question?
It's page 51. Is that sorry. It's regarding removing the track removal. It cost 150,000 to remove the track. I just
What's your question?
My question is that if we can add some money to repair it with asphalt.
Trustee Chin, there's more than one track.
Page 51.
There's more than one track.
Mhm.
What is your question about what
My
track?
question is from the GIED money.
Oh, Trustee Chin, you're not being responsible.
Oh, it's not disrespectful at all. It's my question.
Trustee
I'm
Chin.
finished with it because you continue to ask questions that you've asked throughout the year at other meetings. You don't listen to our chair. And you know what? I want to go home because we're finished and you don't know what you're asking, and I'm tired of it. You're disrespectful to programs that we have, to certain people, and you're focused on tracks. But then on the other hand, you want to help these people, but the track at $450,000 means more to you for whatever reason. Let it go and listen to what our chair has said, please.
I'm sorry I make you offended,
Trustee
but I
Chin?
represent
Trustee Chin.
I represent the community. You know how
Trustee
many
Chin?
people wants to keep the
No,
track.
Trustee
I'm
Chin.
sorry I cannot listen to you.
Is that done? Are there any other questions from any other trustees? We're done with the track. Okay. There are no more questions. I do have a couple comments about the budget. During the consultation program, and we have an appendix at the back of our budget about some of the input that we had during consultation. One thing that came up more than once, it came up a number of times in the comments that I feel it's necessary to clarify. And so the comment that I saw several times was that the board should be thinking about collaborative and innovative approaches to transportation, such as working with other local school boards to coordinate transportation. And I think it's really important to clarify to the public and whoever those several people are who are making those comments that we have been in a transportation consortium with all the 4 local school boards for probably 20 years or more. Yeah, it's been a very long time that we don't do we don't manage transportation on our own, and we haven't for a very, very long time. And the Transportation Consortium provides tremendous economic benefits to all the local school boards in coordinating school bus transportation. Having said that, we still don't get funded at a level that even covers the cost of gas, and there are shortfalls in that area. But in terms of managing transportation, that is done through the consortium, and it's not done by the school board. So although I appreciate that they're trying to make helpful suggestions, I think it's important that people who don't understand who aren't aware that they should know that we have a transportation consortium. The other point that I've seen, and it's not just this year, but I've seen many times in many years, that we should use our surplus money, our reserves, to provide particularly staffing, seems to come up over and over again, or to fund programs. And I think it needs to be understood again that we have very limited surplus funds, and that if you pull that money out to say add 100 staff to our board, that wouldn't be sustainable, because once you pull the money out once, it's gone and it's not back the following year. So there's no way that you could pull out those reserves for anything that would be sustainable over any period of time. The other thing is that we are fortunate as a board to have some surplus funds, because a lot of boards don't have it. And we are required to keep a certain amount in reserve, which we do. We have used our surplus funds to balance the budget, because that's a legal requirement that we have to balance our budget. And the other thing is that we have a tremendous need for urgent, what do you call it? The maintenance, the deferred maintenance on our buildings. Many of them are very old, 100 years or more. And we have to be prepared. I can recall 2 different times where parts of a building fell down, and that wasn't in the budget to repair them, but we had to take that, make that funding available to do that. So we need, and again, we're fortunate to have those reserves if those kind of situations come up. The other thing is that there is no funding for this building, which is why it takes a long time to get an elevator fixed, because we have to find the money. So this building is not funded at all, but yet it is full. It is full of staff who support our classrooms every single day, but there is no funding. So like, it wasn't all that long ago where the air conditioning went out, and that has happened. Where we have a problem with our air conditioning, we have a problem with our heating, whatever it is, that money has to be found from somewhere. And so we're very fortunate that we do have some surplus funds, but I think people need to understand that you can't pull that out for staffing. It just is not sustainable. It's not the answer. And those are the 2 things that I saw repeatedly, and not just this year, but other years. And I thought, I'm going to say something, because I think the public just doesn't understand. And so I thought I would comment on those 2 recurring items tonight. That's all I have. I don't have any questions. My questions have all been answered. And again, I told trustees that at the board meeting, it will not be another round of questioning. That's what this meeting was for. So if you have any questions between now and next week when the board meeting comes up, you should send them in to either the CEO or the Superintendent Armstrong to try and get an answer, because it's not anticipated that we will use our time at the board meeting for another round of questions. So I would ask for your cooperation, and if you do think of another question, you're entitled to ask questions and to seek answers, but please send them in by email. Okay? And my agenda. So we have come to the end of our approved agenda. So I'd like to thank everybody for their time tonight and their attention. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to call the meeting adjourned. Thank you.